Hello, everyone. Welcome. I'm Nicole Cooley, the director of the new reading series, Writers at Queens. And I am thrilled to welcome you all here today, both those of you on the live stream and those of you in the audience. A few words about this new series. Writers at Queens is our new college-wide reading series, co-sponsored by the MFA program in Creative Writing, Literary Translation, the English Department, the Dean of Arts and Humanities, the School of the Arts, and the Kupperberg Center for the Arts. Our goal is to provide programming for the entire college community, and we collaborate with as many departments and programs as possible. We have some flyers about upcoming events over in our reception area that you can take afterwards. So a huge thank you to our co-sponsors who I just named. Also a special shout out to our events manager, John Rice. Where is he? Oh, there he is. Yay. And I also want to thank my MFA program colleague, Roger Sederat. This event is really happening because of a conversation Roger and I had in the hallway in Clapper, right? We started talking, do we have any alums who work in publishing and media? Oh my God, we have amazing alums who work in publishing and media. And so we dreamed this up. So tonight's event is very informal. I'm going to lead a Q&A with our speakers for about 25 minutes in a round robin style, and then we'll have time for some audience questions. Then after the hour, we'll go to our reception on the other side of the gallery and have time for more casual conversation. So nothing, as many of you already know, makes me happier than celebrating our MFA community, our students and alums, and tonight is all about that. So I'm thrilled to introduce our speakers who come to us having gotten degrees at the Queens College MFA program in prose, poetry, and translation. So let me introduce them now. So I'm going to do this in alphabetical order. So Zakiya is first. Zakiya Henderson Brown, just raise your hand. Zakiya Henderson Brown is the author of The Body Losing Its Borders, the winner of the Alice James Awards Editor's Choice. This poetry book is forthcoming from Alice James Books in 2027, which is amazing news. This just happened. And she is the author of What Kind of Omen Am I?, winner of the Poetry Society of America's Chapbook Fellowship. She's also a NYSCA Poetry Fellow, a Cave Canem Graduate Fellow, and has received additional support from the Café Royal Cultural Foundation, Callaloo Journal, the Fine Arts Work Center, and Poets House. She is a senior editor at nonprofit publisher The New Press, and her list includes Pulitzer Prize finalist In a Day's Work, NPR Best Book of the Year, Inventing Latinos, and Prison by Any Other Name, which Publishers Weekly called a must-read. She lives in her native Brooklyn. Rob Gunther, I'm really making everyone raise their hand again. Rob Gunther is a senior producer and guest host of Slate's daily news podcast, What Next? This year, he received a nomination for a Writers Guild Award for his work on an episode of the show titled Inside a Gaza Hospital. He's worked in radio and podcasting since graduating from Queens, with previous roles at WNYC, Apple News, and Business Insider. Jasper Lowe, sitting right beside me, is a poet and journalist currently working as a fact checker at The New Yorker. His poetry is about displacement, often told through the limitations of masculinity. In nonfiction, Jasper reports on the conservative policy of New York City's Chinese community and the triangulation of Chinese America among Black culture and white supremacy. Jenna Teleska is breaking news chief at the Wall Street Journal, a job she just took on. Yeah. She previously has covered investing, crypto, legal affairs, and food service. Jenna holds an undergraduate degree in English from the University of Chicago and an MFA in writing from Queens College. Alexa Wedgko joined Soho Press in the summer of 2018. Formerly an adjunct professor at Queens College, she works on a wide range of fiction. Her list includes The Deepest Lake by Andromeda Romano Lax, Ash Dark as Night by Gary Phillips, and select YA titles, including What's Coming to Me by Frances Padilla and the New York Times bestseller Everless by Sarah Holland. She received her MFA from Queens College in translation. So, as you can see, these five people are amazing. And I'm going to turn this evening over to these writers, ask them a few questions, and then there'll be time for you all to ask questions. So I'm just going to ask everyone a sort of round robin question, and maybe we can go in order. You can be my first victim because you're sitting by me, Jasper. So, I'd love everyone to just answer this. How did you get your start in the fields of publishing and media? So go ahead, pass the mic.
I got I served in the Army before, so I had a lot of VA money, and I used that to get way too many graduate degrees. And at the third one, it was at the School of Journalism, and where I guess you pay like $96,000, and then you go to there's a job fair there that's like 1-to-1 vendors or publications to students, and that's where I got an interview with the head of the New Yorker's website, and he'd offered me the fact-checking job.
So I had a couple starts. In college, I worked at the paper. I worked at the college's first prose magazine online, which was pretty exciting at the time. And I did an internship then, and then I worked for the administration's, like the college administration's paper as an editor after I graduated for a year. And then I did, so I had lots of little micro steps that brought me there. Like I did interning. I did some temping at a publisher at Macmillan before I came to Queens College. And after I left, I needed a job. So I found a job as a fresh foods editor at Supermarket News, which I thought would be just something that was kind of fun to do for a year. And then I fell in love with business journalism, and there's just so many good stories to tell and such a need for like good writing. So that's how I got started.
Okay, I've got my own mic here. My start. Are these mics on? Are they?
Yeah, they're for the live stream.
I see. It feels like a prop. But I actually, so during my MFA, I had an opportunity to adjunct. So I dropped up part-time so that I could teach undergraduate writing my second year. And then my third year, I only had my thesis class, which the government at that time did not believe was enough to qualify for financial aid. So I had to get a job for my third year in my MFA. And I was kind of, I was like a writing tutor at BMCC. And then before grad school, I had been doing a lot of community organizing and advocacy work. And so the New Press, which is where I still work, had published, this is sort of a long walk, but we'll come back to it. They'd published The New Jim Crow by Michelle Alexander in hardcover in 2010. Now this is 2012, and the paperback had come out and it had blown up, and they had created a position called the New Jim Crow Outreach Coordinator, which they're a nonprofit mission-based publishing house that does serious nonfiction. And they were looking for someone who had a background in organizing and advocacy, who was sort of a literary type to help amplify the impact of the book. And it was listed as a part-time position, and like 3 people sent me this job listing, and they were like, "Oh, Z, this looks exactly like you." And I was like, "Oh, it does actually." And so I got that job, and a job which I was doing 4 days a week, and it was supposed to be for a year. And then they just kept tricking me into staying. And then I got an opportunity to do editorial, which I fell in love with. And then now I have been there for almost 13 years. So.
I also have my mic. So I got an internship during my third year at WNYC New York Public Radio at the Brian Lair Show. And it was like a dream come true. I'd been a longtime listener, first time intern, I guess. I'm saying that. But so I got in the door. I got it because I was a grad student at Queens College, and I just stayed there. I finished my internship. I started freelancing immediately, and I always made sure I just had something going on there. I bounced around from show to show until I landed full time at this now defunct show called The Takeaway, which was a national news show. Stayed there for about 4 years. Then I left with my boss at the time. We went to Apple News to help start their podcast division. Did that for about 2 years. Then jumped to Business Insider to launch a daily news show, which since got canceled. And then I made my way to Slate, which I've always loved. And yeah, I've been working there for about 2 years now as a senior producer and like a guest host for that show. And it's great. I've sort of like had this lane that I found in daily news and kind of like wound up there as adjacent to where I was doing here at school. But no, it's been great.
I'll take the fake mic. Okay. I'm sensing a theme. I actually got my first job in publishing while I was in the MFA program directly through Queens College. Because there was a very kind of strange niche fellowship offered by the daughter, actually, of a very prolific writer who teaches or taught at Queens. And I inadvertently pulled the ladder up behind me because I just hung on to that job, which was great for me. It was a very small company. So it was like 4 or 5 person startup company in literary packaging, which is a very niche section of the publishing industry and kind of very commercial in a way that, was almost kind of contradictory to what we were doing in school. So it was a very interesting experience. And then I hung on for a long time until I got hired full time. And that was my first job in publishing. And then I continued from there.
This is so interesting. I'm learning so much about all of you, by the way. And next question, and this may be an impossible one, just to warn you. Describe your typical day, if that's possible, or just tell us about the structure of your work day or your work week. What's it like? Do you work remotely? Are you in the office? Just talk us through your day.
I had to think hard about this question because I think maybe a lot of us share with the news folks here. We kind of have like 3 days, maybe. The sort of day where we're searching for stuff to do, the really busy day, like the breaking news day, and then like the day where you're just kind of like keeping the ship going. You've got a project and you're moving. For us, we are 4 days in office. I think that there are a lot of media corporations right now that are really using that as a method of like soft quitting people and just getting people in the office for power. In terms of what I do during the day, it can start off if I'm like mid project. I may have like a bunch of emails to send, just cold emails to people, some calls that I might be set up to fact check a story. For me, I'm the vice chair of my union, and so it can, which is like something in media that I think many of us will get involved in. And so I'll be between calls. Sometimes I'll walk around, go speak to different employees in the office, kind of like getting organizing efforts off the ground. And then just sort of emails with writers, conversations with writers, going through changes, kind of like talking through elements of their story, and getting through understanding like systems, how to use like Pacer courts. I'm just gonna like walk that back up there. I think that like a lot of what my day to day is just like understanding how systems work, and so sometimes that'll be like, how does a criminal court work? That's kind of like the easiest one, honestly. How does this academic institution work? The structure of power in like in a certain like business industry, and that's helpful because most recently I was able to like figure out my health insurance because it's like figuring out systems, and a lot of my job is just understanding how a writer has sourced their article, how they've like created, how they went about finding sources, and like what kind of spin they may be under, what kind of narratives that are competing with that, and then just figuring out how to sort of straighten the story out, whether it be making it less bias or taking out if they've been spun by a certain person, kind of trying to extract that from the piece, and also just like providing any kind of like further reporting that I can come up with.
Okay. Sorry, tangling you up. So yeah, no usual day. So I run the breaking news desk at the Journal, and so I usually start my day from home. I work in the office 5 days a week now. I run a team of of 10 reporters and editors. And I usually start the day catching up on what happened at London. Like, we have a London reporter, and just seeing like what happened to the markets, and if anything terrible has happened, or something good, and seeing if there's, just making sure all of those stories are going along okay. And if I see some early assignments, I will start making those from home. Usually I am doing this sitting on my stoop with my dog. My dog likes to look at the neighborhood and meet all of his friends. And he doesn't bother me when I'm working during that time. So I start, it's kind of like a continuous day. So like, I'll have some plans that I'm going to do. And usually by midday, I get rid of all of those plans, and have something new to focus on. But, we respond to the news when it happens. And then we also have like a mix of like explainers that we're preparing, and features, and like kind of bigger projects. And I do a lot of workflow stuff, trying to make sure we're faster in the newsroom. So there's like always something, and I'm always using like a different part of my brain at all times, and just being very flexible. And then, a lot of times it's meeting with reporters about their ideas for stories, digging, doing line editing on like news stories, or kind of like conceptualizing like bigger takes and partnerships with other parts of the newsroom. And those stories can vary from like, the legal system, as you were talking about, our friend Pacer, and the criminal courts, and also, politics, the immigration system we're doing a lot on, obviously, and colleges like this one. A little bit of everything. Politics, yeah. That's it.
They can just get that one, and then you and I can shoot this. Okay. Also, no typical day, but in book publishing, or the type of publishing that I do, there's basically, I was trying to think about how to phrase this. There's probably like 4 big categories of things that I could be working on at any given time. And so one is potential book projects. So an agent might be sending me a proposal that I'm reading and considering if I will circulate to share with my editorial colleagues. We have a weekly editorial board meeting where we discuss new projects. I might be working with a potential author directly on a proposal. So some publishing houses only accept book proposals from agents, but for a long time, the New Press did not work with agents at all. Now we're about 50-50, so sometimes we're just reaching out to, a person who wrote a really interesting long form article on something, and you're like, just sort of cold email them, or like, hey, have you ever considered a book project? And you're working with them on that. And then, so that's like book projects that aren't books yet. So that's one thing, you're doing that. Then there's book projects that have recently become book projects. So they've recently been contracted, and there's just a bunch of admin stuff to do that my colleague who assists me and the other senior editor, it's sort of like funneling a bunch of work down like a conveyor belt of so people can get paid, so we can announce the deal and the product in Publishers Marketplace. Just a bunch of stuff related to a project recently being contracted. And then there's projects that are due. So it's like you have a manuscript in, and you're going to take 6 weeks to give it a comprehensive edit. And usually that doesn't happen in the office. Like, I don't know anyone who edits at work, which sounds crazy because like that should be most of our job, but we're like not editing. You're just editing at home. I don't know another way to explain it. I don't know why, but it's just hard to do in the office, I guess, because you're doing other stuff. And then there's projects that are a little bit further along where you're working on sales copy. So you're trying to figure out how to position it to your sales reps who sell your books into the trade. So your sales reps are the people who pitch your books to national accounts like Amazon and Barnes & Noble and regional booksellers. And so you're trying to make your book sound cool and interesting. And also you want to tell the truth about it. So marketing copy is like, you want it to be true, okay, for sure. But you're also trying to, give it a little sunny. So that's another thing. And sometimes it's difficult because the deadlines for sales and marketing copy, and like there's something we do called tip sheets, which are title information sheets, but it's just like it's like your author's platform and all the awards they won, and do they go on podcasts and whatever, all this stuff. But sometimes you actually don't have the manuscript in hand, so you're working from the information from the proposal, which is a little bit of fiction, even though we only work on nonfiction projects. So that's what any given day, the range of things I think it can include.
So daily news, my day is pretty self-contained. It's like start to finish. I'm in the office only one day a week at our office in downtown Brooklyn. Slate has offices in DC and New York, but I think since the pandemic, like this office in general, anyway, has been pretty much remote. And we do 4 shows a week. Each show is a one-on-one with a guest, usually. I mean, we can break format, but it's usually a one-on-one. We're talking about like one big story that's supposed to be like in the headlines that day, which is challenging because it's not live radio, we're a podcast. So we're trying to anticipate what the news of the next day is going to be.
That's hard.
Yeah, it's tough. It's really tough.
It's like hour by hour.
I identify what you said. We're constantly scrapping plans. Like, you make plans and then you just like, you pivot. We're constantly pivoting, and it's like, it's tough. You're letting people off the hook. You're getting new guests. And the toughest one, we don't do a show on Friday and Saturday. We have like a tech show, which is like in our umbrella, but it's kind of a different team. And we're trying to like figure out on Wednesday what we're going to tape Thursday to air Monday. So we wind up doing like Sunday work a lot of the time because we're scrapping plans. But I mean, it's high pace. It's a high octane environment. Every daily news show I've been at, I've done shows where it's been like 7 stories in an hour. I've done shows where it's like you're doing these little 30-second sound bites. And now I feel like really grateful to be at a show that's just like one story that we get to like exhale and really just like get deeper than just like the headlines and the top line stories. But we're a small team. We're about like 5 people. On any given day, I'm either pitching a story, I'm either prepping for the interview, I'm either on Pro Tools actually doing the editing of the, we tape for about an hour and we whittle it down to like 20 minutes. There's a lot of, it can be straightforward. It can be a lot of like, serious editing. And then another shift we have is like mixing, where I'm like adding music, I'm scoring. So I wear a lot of different hats. It's really fun. I tend not to get bored because I feel like the diversity of responsibility is just big. And, sometimes it's easy. Like, like for example, tomorrow's show, we taped with 2 of the immigration reporters that had the really big scoops. One from The Atlantic, Nick Miroff, who talked about the guy who was, detained by accident, like the Trump administration said. And they're just like, sorry, but we can't get you back. And then we taped with Jonathan Blitzer from The New Yorker also, who was talking about the tattoo artist who had like some mistaken tattoo and was shipped off to parts unknown. Which is just like horrifying. But that was like an easy booking because these guys are in the news and we could book them. The harder bookings that kind of take me out of my 24-hour news cycle, like the one that Nicole mentioned, Inside Gaza Hospital. It was with this doctor, Seema Jalani. She's a pediatrician who spent like 2 weeks on a mission in Gaza and just had like, the most insane stories to tell. And getting a hold of her was really tough. And, having like that relationship, just broaching, like, can you basically sit for us and like help us make the show, which sounds exploitative, but I mean, that's the best journalism, I feel like, is just like getting people to open up and really share their stories. But it's just like the day is very, like, when I say it's self-contained, like the show is done, it gets out there, and then, we turn the page and it doesn't exist anymore, onto the next show. So it's kind of like satisfying in that way. It's very fast paced, but it's like something new to do every day. So I'm never bored.
I forgot I was on the panel for a second. That was so fascinating. Like Sakia, that was very healing almost in a way to hear you say that. I'm an acquiring editor, so every day at like 4:45 p.m., the other editors and I look at each other or G-chat each other and are like, have you gotten any editing done today? And no. So that is, a lot of emails saying, apologies for my my delay. I'll get back to you as soon as I can. But yes, kind of frustratingly in some ways, being an acquiring editor and an editor, developmental editor, is a lot of not having time during the day to edit because of admin, which is also important and fun. Sometimes I'm looking directly at you like I do only fiction. Soho Press is the independent press I work for. We do almost exclusively fiction, and we work with literary agents. So we're mostly working with, rough draft, but full manuscripts. So less developmental proposal stuff. We do publish series where there's, we acquire on proposal. Usually editors aren't very, very directly involved in that. So it's the editorial work is a bit different. And usually my day-to-day is a lot like I think Zakia described. We're distributed by Penguin Random House, so we have a lot of meetings with them that editors are involved in, a lot of pitching, a lot of copywriting, a lot of, meetings. But, the bread and butter of the work is and generally should be working directly on manuscripts. So trying to think if there's anything that you wouldn't have mentioned day to day. I'm in the office a couple days a week. We're pretty flexible. We have a staff of about 16 people, so we're still pretty small. That's it.
I was just going to say, I forgot to say, we're in the office 3 days a week, and we work remotely on Mondays and Fridays, and we're a staff of like 27 or 28.
So interesting. I'm loving all the synchronicities here too. So next question is, how do you balance your job with your own writing and also just with your life? Like a work-life balance question for everybody, because it sounds like everybody is working incredibly intensely and at all hours. So I'm really curious to see what people would say to this.
So the three of us, I think that we have like different jobs in the stream of news. I'm like an editorial worker in that, like the editor will commission the piece, the writer writes it, and I work kind of where the copy editor is. And by the time I get it, like I don't commission work, so my hours can be contained in some ways. Although oftentimes it kind of like can run amok depending on the deadline of a piece. I had to think about this question a lot. I think that it's tough to, depending on what kind of job you have, if you're working as a reporter in journalism, how do you write? You do it every day. As a fact checker, it was traditionally a place for writers to emerge from because of the relationships that you build with editors and the kind of proximity you have to the work and the amount of intimacy that you have with people's work. I think oftentimes I think of us as like sort of like heritage building restorers, kind of like you can make a brick exactly the way that it's supposed to be. But what that happens is that like, you're taking on so much of other people's ideas, so much of the editorial sensibility of the organization, that as you kind of like get to understand the so-called like editorial standards of the place, especially as a creative writer, as a poet, I have felt completely erased in that process. Basically, trying to figure out how to get the sort of editorial sensibility and like figuring out what is newsworthy. But I've been able to over the years fight that by actually like dipping really into the themes that I had written during Queen's College. I think that like the time that we were just in studio, basically, I sort of like actually got it all out. And that doesn't necessarily mean that I'm using that work, but I realize that that's what I'm writing about. And so my writing practice can be as literal as like taking a couple hours every day, although I rarely do that as much as Roger's like, have you written today? And I'm like, no, man. I've barely written anything this week, maybe this month. One helpful tip that I found to myself was what's the shortest amount of time I can work for? And that's helpful. But developing a writing process for me has been, I think it's been really important for me to draw boundaries on the work. And that is kind of like how the work as in like the day-to-day work. And that's why I had mentioned organizing before, because I think that being a member of a union in media is something that for me has become part of my job just as much as all of these other aspects. I'm able to write now because of the protections that I've like built for myself, that the union has built for us, that is a lot of conflict. It's me looking at my boss and being like, no, like you have to compensate me for my time, and it makes for a lot of awkward conversations. But I think at some point I realized that I wasn't born to go be a fact checker. But like, where does the poetry go? Where does all that writing go? It gets sucked up in all these extra hours that you get back to the institution. It just gets sucked up in the wage theft. It gets sucked up in all that stuff. But once I started to be firm about the workplace, I was able to, I could feel like my ideas firming up too, that like, that I wasn't just like being taken by the organizations, and not necessarily that like the New Yorker is like this big bad organization like stealing your thoughts. It's just that like as you're trying to like be part of it, you like start to feel like this is a New Yorker story. It's got to be this way. It's got to be this way, and that sort of like drives you crazy, I think. And so in having these kinds of conflicts, I've been able to sort of come back to myself.
Nicole used to say, like, nobody's going to care if you write ever again after you graduate. And that haunts me sometimes.
I'm really sorry, Jenna.
You've had so many sayings that are so helpful and relevant. But so how do I balance my own writing? I don't, to be honest. And I'm okay with that, actually. I've had, I ran like a reading series and a writing group for like a long time, John and I, and that was great. But right now I'm at a point where I get a lot out of helping other people write creative things. Like I've had a story or two on the front page, and I've done writing when I've had to, but it doesn't feel as good as when I help somebody else take their writing from here to here. And, I couldn't do that on my own. It's like the sum of the parts elevate it, and I just really enjoy the team aspect and the you're part of an orchestra and everyone has their part, and then also being like the editor that's like, I didn't go to journalism school. If you want to do something crazy, like let's talk, I'll talk, let's translate the rose like Roger did. So yeah, right now my creativity is like through as editor, as like a facilitator. I do, I journal and I do certain projects. But right now I'm focused on just doing my job and getting a lot out of it.
What was your genre?
I was a prose writer.
You're a prose writer.
So,
Okay.
yes, yeah.
Yes, yeah.
But, the sentences, like, just being very careful with sentences is was super important, and I use it every day. And business journalism could be really, really, really boring if you're not careful, and people won't want to read it. And it's so important, I think, to the why things happen in the world. So, yeah, I use my craft all the time.
Good. I think the answer to your original question, Nicole, is intermittently, which is to say, sometimes not at all, but sometimes just sort of like in fits and starts. I too remember very, it haunts me, in fact, the fact that you constantly reminded us that no one would care if we never wrote again once we left. And so we would, we were being charged with finding a way to keep ourselves interested in our own writing practice. And I think for me, that's mostly been, so there's like a period of time that I call my like fellowship years. So it's like when I was doing my MFA, I did a Callaloo fellowship, I got into Cave Canem, and then shortly after I graduated, I did the Poets House Emerging Poets Fellowship. And then, so there was like kind of a body of work because those fellowships were all like these writing intensive workshop weeks or months in some cases. And so I was like creating a body of work. Kamiko, who was my thesis advisor here, was always on about the Poetry Society of America Chapbook Fellowship. And I was like, I don't want to publish a chapbook. You know what I'm saying? I was like, I don't want to do that. But then I was working this insane full-time job. And finally I was like, well, let me just see what I have. And it was like, a strong 23 pages, of poems. And I was like, oh, so anyway. So then when I won the PSA Chapbook Fellowship, then I was like, okay, now I can work on a different set of poems. And so I would just sort of seek out opportunities to do really like intensive, an intensive like 6 weeks. So I did a workshop with Lynn Melnick at the 92nd Street Y a few years ago. And I had a bunch of drafts of poems that I call my brother poems. My brother passed away. And I just was like, I'm just going to work on these poems, every week. So it was just a group of some of her former students. And so it was kind of like that. Like I just have to make a plan and then carve out some time and then do it. The award that I won recently with Alice James. So Alice James is going to publish my first full-length collection of poems, but they schedule books very far in advance. So this book that I've been, easily putting together for the better part of the last decade will not publish for another 2 years. And so what an opportunity to make new work, I guess. So I'm trying to figure out, now I have a small child. So like being away seems not likely. So anyway, so it will be a fun challenge to figure out how I will continue to make new work. But yeah, I think it just has to be, for me, it works best when I'm just sort of carving out some like intensive time to just get it done. So.
Yeah, definitely intermittent. I'm glad you said that. Yeah, when I was a student here, I was like very militant about getting a certain amount of words done every day, and I was really good about that for a long time. I still keep the flame alive, so I'm still writing. Sometimes it's not every day, which is like, it still hurts me to say that, but I'm like okay. I actually am okay with it now. I have 3 kids, got this job. And it's like, yeah, life is just completely different than when I finished here in 2017. It's just like, it's bigger. Like the world is like, my world is bigger. It's good. It's like not, it's like, but at the same time, like I always have that like gnawing, like, I haven't written a book yet. Like I haven't finished a collection of short stories. And I have like, not even joking, like 100,000 Google Docs, untitled Google Docs in my Google Drive. It's just like, it feels good. It scratches an itch. Like I can write something and it's like, I do need to figure out like structure. I figure like I'm feeding the flame right now. And like, I'm confident that like, it's there for me. Like I haven't gotten too far from it and it will always be there for me. The thing that's challenging is like, I do get a lot of satisfaction out of my job in terms of it scratches a creative itch. Like, I'm like doing things that feel like I'm writing, and I am writing. I'm like, I feel like I'm contributing on things that are written, and then they exist as sound, and they're edited, and it's really fulfilling. But like it's like what Jasper said too. It's like that's ultimately I'm like writing for a publication, and I'm writing as part of a team, and I'm I'm trying to fit that into a certain editorial voice. So it's kind of hard, like, it's hard to like let go. Like I think being strict with my time, I co-sign everything Jasper said about union. Like I'm also part of a union. I think without union protection, it's really easy to get even further sucked into the work than like I naturally would be. I feel like it's hard to turn off, but having those guardrails, knowing that like the example I'm setting for my team, like if I'm overworking, that's not good for the team. So, but yeah, like I am writing, like I still am in contact with a lot of writers from this program, and yeah, it's there. It's like, it's hard. Like I think my goals when I finished here were like, I'm going to immediately write like, a book a year, and it's just gonna like, I'm just going to keep going. And like, it's just like, I'm very glad that this place like helped me like focus my energies, and I'm still figuring out how to like focus them even more. But yeah, it's just like a choice, and it's always there for you. So like, if it's not there for you like today, you don't have to like freak out. And I'm talking to myself now, of course.
Yeah. No, you're talking to me too. I feel that I don't remember that statement from you, Nicole, and now it's going to haunt me as well. But it's also freeing because you do kind of realize once you get some perspective that your literary career can last forever, last your whole life if you're a creator and an artist and a writer. Speaking of work-life balance, really quickly to be slightly less bleak than what I had said before about editorial is I do want to give a shout out to my company. I don't, work for a huge conglomerate, but our kind of work culture has been to like a very sensible degree, trying to protect our time as much as possible. So we are not expected to email after hours. We get our hands slapped if we do. Like there is, we don't have a union, but we're a small company, but we do. It is really important to find a work culture in a creative life. I think that does support its employees in that way. We've started doing things like we have editorial retreat days where we are allowed to put our away message up and edit. And that's our responsibility to make sure we're doing that. I'm speaking to myself. But for me, writing wise, I did kind of let go in some ways of that pressure. And I also do freelance work. There's a lot of freelance work if you can kind of get into it in children's publishing specifically. So I publish under different names or do projects that don't have I don't necessarily have a strong emotional tie to, but it keeps the writing just practice alive. And I've been really, really thankful for that because it's a different creative mode. And to be honest with you, it's practical, you get paid for it, generally speaking. So that has been a nice outlet for me. But then, of course, then it creates more things to do and less time for your own personal work that's, might see the light of day, so to speak, and might not. So there are different little things you can pursue.
Excellent. All right. I think in the interest of time, I'm going to turn it over to audience questions for any of our panelists. Just please raise your hand.
Yeah. So this is a question I wanted to pose to all of you because as a current writer, I feel like this question really resonates with me and I kind of need that encouragement that I'm not alone right now. What were some hardships that you went through in your career and how did you prevent yourself from getting too discouraged to continue going?
Let me just repeat the question, which is what are some hardships that you encountered in your career and how did you keep yourself from getting too discouraged? How did you keep going?
Do you mean our careers in, sorry, just a clarifying question, our careers in publishing and media or our writing careers?
I don't want anything traumatizing, honestly. I in your careers, when you're, because I currently am a creative writer right now. So I guess in your writing careers.
Yeah. So I say every day in journalism is a good day because you don't know if there's going to be another. So it's a hard industry to be in. As far so that there's plenty of colleagues that have gotten laid off throughout my career. Lots of publications that have gotten smaller. That's hard, and you kind of have to think about okay, if this doesn't work out, what am I going to do next, and I've been lucky that I've been able to make a career out of this. And I did it in kind of a strange way where finding places where you can be creative, even if it's not exactly what you thought you were going to do. I found that very helpful throughout my career. Who would have thought supermarkets were going to be this very interesting world? I covered fresh foods and the florists, right? They were secret poets. I love them. And you keep coming back to the people and finding ways to express yourself in different ways. But you want more hardships. Every time every time you have a blank page or, a really hard edit, it feels like the first time, and then you just do it. And, it's, you lower your expectations, right? As another Nicoleism, and get rid of that writer's block because you know what, you get it done and then you can fix it. And there's just some really awful days where you feel like you can't do anything right. And you do get better and you see the person I was when I graduated the program, I learned so many things then, but I've been able to work on so many skills that I didn't think I'm so much better in a lot of ways at writing and editing. So yeah, I guess that's anybody else?
I think that I think the biggest challenge that probably all of us are talking around is just like synthesizing our writing selves into our professional selves. Like there's no school for it's not a Master of Fine Arts in editing for some strange reason. Like you go into like the professional world and then it's like editors like it's what runs the place turns out. And I think that like trying to figure out how to like are you going to be an actuary who does your actuary work and then writes very diligently for 3 hours every day? Are you going to synthesize that more because you're going to find like the beauty in the florist and like in reporting and like bringing out the voices of others? And I think that like figuring out how if you're going to whatever that expression is, if you're going to do it through writing, through reporting, through editing, and whether or not the thing that you're trying to describe is something that you'll continue to describe through writing or I think is like kind of the biggest challenge in sort of sorting through if you are to go through a career in like publishing and media, I think.
I'll also say like, journalism media is really tough. Lots of layoffs. I was at the show at Business Insider that got canceled when our third kid was born. So I was on like leave only. I was working full-time freelance, so I didn't really have leave. I was just kind of like off into the extended wilderness. No, it's tough. Like even at Slate, there was like 6 layoffs like a month ago or something like that. There's a lot of survivor's guilt about having a job. I think that like the instinct though is to like hang on really tight to what you have. I've left 2 jobs in media, which is like crazy. And like both times everybody in my life was telling me not to do it. But like, I mean, I was at New York Public Radio and things got really toxic there. Apple was really toxic place to work at. And it's just like, you got to take care of yourself. I mean, like, it's just like, if I want to be the kind of person that I feel like can like stare at a blank page and like actually give it 10 minutes of time, I have to like, I don't know. For me, I can't just be like sucked up by a job that like is chewing me up on the daily. I mean, that's of course an incredibly privileged thing to say, like, to leave a job is not everybody can leave a job. So I'm not saying like quit your job, but it's just like media, I think though, is kind of like, there's always going to be a fresh crop of graduates out there who are willing to like get their foot in the door and work internships for free and take lower pay than you are getting paid for. And I would just say like, if you do get in that position and you find yourself like with a couple of years under your belt, like don't think that like you just have to hang on and that this is it, because it's not like just you're worth more than that. So
I guess just really quickly, I think there is like great merit if you're a creative writer, a fiction writer, a poet as well, I'm sure, but like at a certain point, if you're putting yourself out there, you have to find constantly the right balance of protecting yourself and letting other people in. And I say this mostly from the editorial side of the person that's causing some of this discomfort for writers, by giving feedback or intense feedback, feedback on something where you're maybe the first person who's really getting in there, And I think being in an MFA program is one thing of like, you obviously are opening up to your peers. And I think if you enter the world of trying to be traditionally published or, quote unquote, making it in that sense, it feels different, I think, because you're not always working with your peers. And I even say that like writing those freelance projects, like I've been publishing or in publishing for like 10 years and giving people like line edits that are sometimes kind of intense or intense feedback and being like, it's all for the sake of the book. And then receiving like a line edit on a freelance project I'm doing and like wanting to like throw my computer across the room and having to like sit with that. And those emotions, I don't think like sometimes it's not to be traumatic, hopefully, but like, I don't know if they ever really go away, especially when you're working with creative work. So I think that is thinking about the long term and thinking through some of those things is just really important to kind of ground yourself and remind yourself why you're doing this.
Alrighty, just round this out. I kept forgetting to say we also have a staff union at my job. Very few book publishing houses are unionized because they're all a part of a big corporation, the Big Five, and the only other union in our, the only other book publisher that's in our union is HarperCollins, and they went on strike, and it was like really shitty. And anyway, so I was a shop steward for 6 years in my union, and it is so important just as far as like protecting your time, and also in book publishing, which is the case in I'm sure a lot of other industries. There's something that's just called responsibility creep, where it's just over time your responsibilities increase, but your compensation does not. And so unions are great for that, which all goes back to like protecting your work and your time. And then there was one other thing I wanted to say, which is that you were you were saying there's no MFA in editing. I want to discourage anyone who is considering getting a master's in publishing to just don't do it. It's a waste of money and time. Anyway, and then as far as like, sorry, it's just a pet peeve. I mean, it's okay. Anyway, but as far as disappointment, so I was just gonna say, like, to answer your original question, when I was doing my MFA and then shortly thereafter, I was like, I have to get all these publication credits. I was like, there are these fancy journals, and I have to work my way into getting into these journals, and I was just constantly rejected. I mean, it was just a lesson in rejection, just every day. I mean, not every day, but like every week it seemed like. And I think the thing, I mean, eventually I was, getting published here and there. But I think the biggest thing is that depending on which genre you're in, like poetry is actually a very small, friendly world is how I found it over all this time. And so building community amongst other poets, like I started to get asked to submit poems just because someone I knew was like, guest editing a journal, or whatever. And so it's just, so I would say just sort of build community in whatever genre you're in whenever you can, and be patient. So.
Excellent. Another question from the audience. Anybody else have anything else?
Yeah. Hi. I'm an aspiring reporter. This is a question to everyone. With the rise of AI technology, do you feel that it helps or hinders your work?
Oh, such a great question. Let me just repeat it. With the rise of AI technology, does it help or hinder your work?
I'm like terrified of AI. It seems to be getting better. I don't think anything that's out there now is good enough to like replace my job yet. But like the fact that it probably will be soon is scary. I've had meetings. I had a meeting like a few months ago where it was just like kind of like a team. I forget, we're brainstorming for something. I don't know. It could have been just like a regular check-in. But one of the younger people on our team was like pitching that the team integrate ChatGPT into our workflow. And I'm just like, I was just like, absolutely not. Like, I really don't use it at all. Like, I just think it's, I don't know. I sound like a Luddite as I'm saying that, but I'm sure there are applications for it. Like, I think it, from my understanding is that like, it's really good for like medical researchers. I think it can synthesize a lot of data really quickly. Like, I think there are applications for this technology. I don't think it's good for like our business.
I have not used it, but I am hopeful that there are applications, especially when you're getting like data dumps, tons of stuff, like being able to quickly figure out like what the themes are in there. And then you can go back and like verify, like it maybe can skip some steps for you or help you, like a calculator or like a thesaurus. I don't know. Because I believe in like computer assisted reporting in general is like a really good tool. Do I use it for stories? No. And I think it's important to have the human involved, but like we should let the computers help us, and so we could do better stories and we can save time where we can. But usually that's in the reporting process, I would say.
I've used ChatGPT in fact checking. I also get a lot of LinkedIn messages from like weird places and people and academics who are like AI, Coinbase, like fact checking, kind of like how is AI affecting fact checking? And I never entertain any of that because I think that there is this thought that like with the type of fact checking that I do, which is narrative nonfiction, it can't be replaced by AI at all. It's like, how do you replace? You can't replace like a nonfiction writer with AI because they don't know how to call someone, build a rapport, ask them about like where they're from, and also say like, I'm also from there, or like my mom's from there, or like my cousin spoke that dialect. Like you can't do that. But I used ChatGPT. Court documents also very helpful. I think in reporting, I've used. I don't know if anyone listens to Hard Fork. I found that to be a helpful resource of like understanding, how to use these technologies. Notebook LM was something that Google had pushed out, and they were kind of like raving it for a little bit. I tried using Notebook LM for my reporting, and I felt that a lot of times I was leaning on it because I was just so anxious about my reporting that I needed someone to just like read through it and tell it back to me. But like as I started to just like kind of loosen up and relax, I didn't need it at all. I think that a lot of times technology can be a lot of like dressing that eventually weighs down the car. You just don't need a lot of the stuff. But in terms of researching, I've used ChatGPT as a means of I don't know if anyone's noticed, but like Google has gotten really bad. Like I feel like in their incorporation of AI, I feel like this is Dr. Google might lose his license. But Dr. Pacer's there with us the whole way. And I find that ChatGPT is good for as like an advanced like web-based librarian, basically. Like what kind of keyword searches should I use if I'm trying to find this? As I'm trying to understand like the terminology of something, like traditional fact checking would mean that I'm gonna try to call an institution and find someone, and that can take like half a day sometimes. But like playing phone tag, ChatGPT can kind of bring you up to speed to just like know what word to use, not necessarily like what it is or like but it can kind of give you like a quick introductory to figure out how to like get your foot in the door.
Great. We have time for one more audience question. If anyone has one. Does somebody have a final question? Yeah.
I'm sorry, I have to record this. I'm writing an article. I have two questions. What advice do you have for young people pursuing writing, specifically in journalism? And you all went to like Queens College and stuff. And how has Queens and its culture influenced you in your work?
Okay, so it's a two-part question. This is our final question. One is, remind me the first part of your question again about. What advice do you have? Okay, yeah. What advice do you have for young people? And then the second part of the question, working in journalism in particular. And then the second part of the question is how Queens College and Queens have influenced your work. Anybody want to start with this one?
Well, I'll start with just a quick answer to the second question because I should not be giving any young aspiring journalism student advice. But as far as Queens, I mean, it's been a long time since I was at the MFA program, but I was just saying this to Roger, is I was originally in the translation track, and I, as a relatively young person at that time, was just so astounded by how brilliant everyone was and still is, I'm sure. And just truly, like, not to use a cliche, but just the completely different walks of life everyone came from, and the experience that they were allowed to bring into the classroom and the workshops. Like I still, even though I've been out of touch with a lot of people for a long time, I still think about them, and it just really, really just opened my mind to a lot of things, especially in translation specifically. And I do carry that with me, so yeah, a little corny, sorry, but.
Yeah, I'll just echo that. No, I think this place was like magical. I can't. And here's the thing: like you're doing it, you get 3 years to do it, 2 or 3 years to do it. You're not breaking the bank doing it. I mean, it was like compared to any other program that's not like a CUNY place. I mean, it's just like a no-brainer. And it's not like the program is small. It was intimate. I mean, we all got to know each other. We all got to know each other's writing. We were all taking it super seriously. We showed up. It was. And like, how does that connect to journalism? I think that daily journalism for me, daily news, it's insane. Like I would have not have thought this before I got into journalism, but I'm constantly taking things that are existing in the real world and turning them to narratives with a beginning, middle, and end. And I think that's something that I would not have been. I mean, maybe I would have figured it out eventually, but this place told me to do that. Like, I mean, like you're reading books, you're examining how they're structuring those narratives, and it's just like you get exposed to different ways of doing it. And it becomes part of like how you see things and how you are able to communicate stories that, you know, you think just because it exists, it's news. Like, it's just like, oh yeah, like read the newspaper. There it is. It's like, if it's not presented in a digestible narrative, it's like, it's not going to connect. And no, I'm forever grateful to this place. It's just, it was like 3 of the best years of my life here.
No, I can't say anything about journalism, but Queens, so the MFA was a very special place. I mean, also, excellent 3 years. And I am a Brooklyn person, so I'm born and raised in Brooklyn. I live in Brooklyn. And so coming to Queens 2 or 3 times a week was like a getaway. I mean, it was sort of like a intellectual... You know, you're like taking these day trips. It's like you leave your house in the morning and you're gonna be there all day. The campus is beautiful, you know what I mean? And so you can just be like, this is my day for reading and writing and like talking with people about reading and writing. And so it was really special in that sense. Now, it still is, even getting here tonight, where I work in Lower Manhattan. I was telling Nicole that I took 3 buses here. Okay. They're like these commuter buses, which are really effective. But when I posted about this event, a girlfriend of mine said that Queens is like Guam. So I think she was trying to say that Queens is to the rest of the city as Guam is to like the continental United States. So anyway, so it's just, I feel like it has a certain air about it that makes you feel like things are possible, because it's sort of like this far away magical place. Now, that's obviously, I'm a Brooklyn person, so maybe other people feel differently.
So in many ways, my experience of Queens has impacted like what I do now. As I was saying, like the attention to each sentence. Like, I remember John Weir would spend like an hour on one sentence, or be like, I think your story starts on the 7th page, and it was like an 8-page story. And like thinking about different ways to like enter a story too, like using people and making sure, like showing change happening. Like I use those tools. And I also remember like what it's like to write, put your whole heart on the page, and then have your friends rip it apart. And, you know, I always remember that as an editor, that, you know, this is more than just words on a page. It's a lot to people. So, you know, I also say you can't hurt me anymore because I did an MFA program. So, yeah, lots of great things. I mean, wonderful. And I loved that I was going to say editors, but the professors here were just always game for like making stories better no matter what they were about. Like whether I had stories about ceramic chickens, this guy growing out of the other guy's back, and Roger was like, yes, let's do it. And so was Nicole. So that was really helpful. And as for becoming a better journalist, I think it's the same thing as becoming a better writer in general. Is like you do it, you know, you just keep doing it, and then you don't just say, okay, that's good enough. You just see how you can make it better, and you read people that you admire and see how to apply it. And you take writers that aren't necessarily journalists and try see why that's resonating with you. Is it they're really explaining people in a way that you like, or are they're bringing something to life in a way where you get a sense of place? Like kind of explore why you like it and then try that out in your writing.
And maybe this isn't specific to Queens College, but for journalism generally, and having gone into journalism, well, I guess like all of us went into journalism after this. Well, you started before. But I think that Queens, in a lot of ways, is representative of, like, you can find the entire country's story in some ways in Queens. You can find those that are who are being deported by ICE in the same borough as the people who are calling for the deportations. They're people that you may have grown up with, both those that are being targeted for deportation and those who are really gung-ho about, the sort of blood cries for it. And I think that I grew up in Queens, and I think that like getting to the cool places like Brooklyn and Manhattan, there's a kind of rush to you feel like you need a rush to what everyone else is looking at, but I think that much of it you may have already seen, just in a way that wasn't packaged in in the way with the polish that is presented to us in news. But chances are you know all the characters in the story already.
That is a beautiful note to end on. Thank you all for coming. Those of you on the live stream, thank you for logging on. And please join us at our reception across the rotunda, have some cookies and seltzer, and chat with all these wonderful people. Thank you all.